Hello, welcome anybody tuning in here. I've got Ron Ridenour joining me today for a discussion on Trump's latest, declarations of annexing Greenland, among other places in that part of the world. Ron Ridenour, before we get into the conversation, Ron Ridenour is a veteran journalist who's been at the trade for an activism for over 60 years. I've got a copy of his latest book here, the Russian Peace Threat, Pentagon on Alert, and this is a really fantastic tome of work that covers history back to the October Revolution in 1917 and all through the 20th century, the various imperialist wars, the Cold War, etc., and how um, Russia has always been an object for American imperialist power to conquer. Ron has also written several other books. One is Backfire. This is when he was working and living in Cuba. He worked for the Cuban government's press agency, the publishing house, the La Prensa. Ron was a journalist there, a media operator, and he lived and worked in Cuba for several years, and out of that has got a tremendous wealth of knowledge on Central American, Latin American politics, the dirty war that the US conducted throughout that whole continent, which it claims to be its backyard. Um, in later years, Ron Ridenour, who I met actually 32 years ago in Cambridge when Ron was doing a book reading on this very book, Backfire, the one that I've shown you before, his more beautiful, in-depth Russia peace threat book. But 32 years ago, Ron was touring the world promoting Backfire, his book on Cuba. And it's an intriguing read where first-hand reporting. Ron Ridenour investigated how the CIA tried to infiltrate Cuban intelligence and were thwarted, and it was a serious defeat for American espionage and intrigue in Cuba, as the subtitle goes, Backfire, the CIA's biggest burn. So there's so much to talk with Ron Ridenour about. We could really spend all night talking with Ron and more. But right now we're talking. We want to talk about Greenland. Ron's interest in Greenland, in particular, is fired up by his disdain for Denmark, which is a founding member of NATO. Denmark was one of the 12 founding members of NATO, and it has, over the years, according to Ron Ridenour, displayed abject servility to the US empire. I'm just going to try to share an article, the latest article that Ron wrote. He did a series on um, Denmark, as it's provocatively titled, as you can see, Scandinavians, the world's happiest people, love killing for the USA, part four. Implicit there is that there's part one, part two, and part three. We published it. It was published on Strategic Culture Foundation, but the original publishing site was Covert Action magazine, the excellent magazine Covert Action magazine. We've just I'm just showing you the article as it appeared in Strategic Culture Foundation, the exact same text, and all the links are there to parts one, two, and three. Now, I'll just go back to our main screen with the wonderful Ron Ridenour. Ron, you want to talk about Greenland and Trump's very, some people would say, bizarre, demand to annex Greenland by force or through financial purchase. What's your take on all that, Ron?
Yeah, but just a short comment first. There's two more parts of that series that you just mentioned that will be at Covert Action Magazine and then Strategic Culture Foundation. Well, of course, we all know that Trump is a big liar, a misogyn, a racist, a narcissist, uh, a would-be Mussolini. and that the United States is in tremendous turmoil, and that the Democrats, who have made just as many wars as the Republicans, and in fact, it was the Democrat Woodrow Wilson that invaded Russia when it had a very peaceful revolution. And ever since, all presidents have done everything they can to prevent Russia from being its own country, its own sovereignty, and from developing socialism. When I heard Trump say what he said, I was with my love partner and we were watching the news, and I just yelled with joy, hallelujah. This is the best thing. I've lived 35 years in this colony of the United States, who is the owner of its colony in Greenland. And
Okay, you're referring to Denmark as an American colony, a de
yeah,
facto.
a vassal state, lackey, a butler, and it's a colony basically of the United States. And I'll read a couple of quotes from its current uh, prime minister, who was also the prime minister and has been the prime minister ever since Trump was in office. And uh, and I had hoped then that that Denmark would learn something from this Trump in his first period, and maybe they'd be interested in taking their sovereignty back, which they simply just delivered without any pressure to the United States. But when Trump said this now, I said, wow, this is maybe what I had hoped for in 2016 when I wrote that maybe Denmark will learn that it doesn't have an ally. The United States doesn't have any allies. Perhaps it has two actual allies, what they call Great Britain and the fascist Zionist Israel. Now, every president has done something to continue or create genocide. The first genocide was against the Native Americans in the United States, and then the black people from Africa, and now the Palestinians. So I hoped that that this would shock enough people to begin to say, hey, maybe we should have our own sovereignty. And I'm not going to give up hope on that yet, but we've only had a week. And this week has been the most interesting in my 35 years here in Denmark.
Right.
Every political party in Denmark is in the government. I mean, in the parliament is 8 political parties, and every one support NATO and support fascist Ukraine. Denmark prides itself with being one of the one or two countries that have given per capita more money and weapons to fascist Ukraine than all the others per capita than the United States. And in absolute figures, it is number 4 after US, Canada, and Germany. Norway is number 7, and Sweden is number 10. Mette Frederiksen is the name of the prime minister. She's a so-called social democrat. When she said to Trump in 2019, when he first said, I'd like to buy Greenland, she made the faux pas of saying, that's absurd. Now that injured this narcissist so much that he canceled the planned trip to Denmark. But they saw each other not so long thereafter in London at a NATO meeting. And this prostitute came back to Denmark and said, we swing together well. And then she began to increase what they had been paying in NATO, 1.5%. Trump wanted 2%. Today, it's 2.4%. She did everything that Trump or Biden and the CIA and the Pentagon want. There have been scandals since then. The biggest scandal in the history of Denmark has been that Edward Snowden leaked that Denmark was giving, every surveillance that they have of the Danish people and the leaderships are in Europe. They give it directly to the NSA, the National Security Agency, and the CIA. Denmark was so embarrassed that they fired their counterpart of the CIA leader for having done something wrong, which they never said. 3 years was he under surveillance and spent a couple of months in jail, and they finally dropped the case. I mean, Denmark is the most servile of any land you can imagine. And yet, most of the people in Denmark and in the world think it's a lovely place. They have a lot of democracy. But when you really talk to people about what democracy means, they end up by saying, yeah, we really don't make any decisions, do we?
Mm.
I
So,
see the possibility now that that could change. Today, by coincidence, I saw a small businesswoman uh, from Greenland who lives in Denmark selling, you know, Greenland souvenirs. And I asked her, what do you think of this? And she said, the only thing I want to say is that now the past racism of Denmark against our people is on the agenda. And if we have time, I can give you up to date, up to just last year, one racist handling, against another. Even the United Nations representative came here for 10 days in 2023 and said he found racism overall.
yeah, Ron, could I just cut in on you there just to maybe give a little bit of helpful background? That the people of Greenland, some 57,000 population, from what I understand, most of them are indigenous Inuit people, Arctic indigenous people. They're not, the white-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Nordic Scandinavians or Danish um, stereotype. So that kind of that informs your uh, what you're saying there about the racist attitude of Denmark towards its de facto colony, Greenland. Although Denmark, I would say, incorporated Greenland into the Danish constitution in 1953. It wasn't just a kind of an appendix, a colony up there in the North Atlantic, Arctic. They made it, formalized it into some kind of integral part of the Kingdom of Denmark. But effectively, since the racist attitudes or the condescending attitudes of Danish people, the rulers that is, towards the Greenland people continues to this day.
Well, definitely. A little bit of history. The Vikings here, you take up a telephone book and you'll see dozens of pages with Viking as the name for a firm or buses. The local bus I take is a Viking bus.
Mm.
Now, who were the Vikings? Depending upon how you interpret Marxism, I will say that the Vikings were the first imperialists. Back 800 after Christ to 10,000 to 1050, 250 years, the Vikings ruled all of Scandinavia, Danes, Norwegians, Swedes. They were the first Europeans to invade the Newfoundland, or to come over to North America, Newfoundland, Labrador, Vineland. And I just done a little research today, and we don't have time, but I can tell you that when they go to discover a new land, they plunder, they rape, they torture, and they murder. If you were a Christian in Ireland, where you come from, or England, they cut the throats of monks, and they stole Irish people to settle Iceland. The first people on Iceland were Irish.
Mm,
And Eric the Red and his son ruled, Danes, Norwegians ruled the made slaves of your people. I don't understand why Englanders and Irish think so well of Vikings today. It's absolutely stupid.
mm,
So they and I, and you can go, anybody can go and read what I read, what they did. And I've got some quotes from the Icelandic sagas, where Eric the Red and his son, and they went here and they killed there, and then the indigenous people were able to shoot some of them with their arrows. And I don't know, we don't have time to go into all of the history. But another thing that needs stating is that Charles Darwin's Origins of the Species, when he talked about the survival of the fittest, this idea has been used, especially by the Nordic countries and Germany, in favor of Nazi Germany to show that non-white people, indigenous people from countries that they have invaded and colonized and enslaved, are inferior people. This and the social democrat justice minister of two times in 1920s and 1930s, when Hitler was already in power, and from 1933, this man wrote that. Let me see if I can make a quick reference to what he said. Uh, well, I can't find my quote significantly, but he said that it's important to have psychological tests on indigenous people, Greenlanders, in order to determine if they are strong enough to have their own children, so that they could have tests that could take their children away. Today, that still has been an issue. And
mm.
they have taken many children away from many thousands of Greenlanders
So, Ron, you're
because
saying
they were
you're sorry,
not of an IQ that they considered high enough.
just
Greenlanders, like many indigenous people, concentrate mostly on skills, things that, hard, what can I do, and not so much in studies.
to run the Danish foreign minister in the 1930s was approving, endorsing Nazi ideology of racial, you know, superiority.
Yeah,
Right.
yes.
Now,
Uh,
Ron, so I take it,
here's his name. Here's his name. Uh, Steinche, Justice Minister for forced sterilizations of women, what they considered mentally weak and socially vulnerable. He wrote a book about that in 1920. And anybody can, look and find what I'm telling you to be the truth.
hmm,
To this day, there are psychological tests given to Greenlanders who live in Denmark. And the tests are designed for Danish people who have been born here and speak Danish perfectly and Danish culture. And it's not designed for Greenlanders. But when they come to an IQ difference, that it's too low, they can still take children away from Greenlanders. To this day, they can still do that. So
hmm,
racist Trump, and his son have every right to say that that Denmark is a racist state and has been since the Viking times.
hmm, yeah. I mean, the indigenous people of Greenland, Ron, from what I researched or found, that the last government they voted in 3 years ago, 2021, that
Oh,
government is very strongly pro-independence from Denmark, and they got a majority. So there is a strong independence movement in Greenland, and they have achieved some kind of autonomy. It's going to be it's quite feasible that they could actually secede from Denmark,
All right.
become an
Uh,
independent country.
well, okay. I had to write up all of this because I can't, I'm 85 years old and I can't remember everything any longer. But Greenland is still part of the Danish realm. They were colonized in 1721 by Denmark and Norway. At that point, Denmark owned Norway. They um, they continued to dominate Greenland as a colony until 1814, and then Denmark took over totally. Uh, and the first reason for colonizing, uh, yes, this is very important. Greenland was the church. Now, what is the church? Martin Luther Church. Anybody can look at Mein Kampf in 1921. Hitler wrote that Martin Luther, now he's back to 1500s in Germany. Martin Luther was the major ideological spokesperson for the Reformation. That's to say, to go from the Catholic Church, and he created his own church, which is now the Lutheran Church. And one of the big differences was that he said that people could learn to read and read the Bible. But what did he do? He did the same thing to Catholics. He murdered, he hung, he burned women on the cross for they were witches. He wrote a little pamphlet saying that the Jews should be exterminated. Get this. They should not have a job. They should not live. They should not have a house. This was in the 1500s. And he helped the princes and other large landowners murder 100,000 peasants who were in uproar to wanting to have a living wage. 100,000 out of 300,000. Now that motherfucker is the leader of the Lutheran Church in many countries, including England and all of Norway. Now Martin Luther, I'm sorry that Martin Luther King's parents did not know what I know to call him that,
Yeah.
but uh, Martin Luther, as I said, was a hero of Hitler. He called him the greatest German nationalist in our history, ours, Germany's.
Right, right.
I mean, you
And
know,
Ron,
and
like, Ron, I'm gonna have to kind of like put a little stop to that line of thinking, because we're running out of time here, Ron. We've only got about 7 minutes left. Ron, so you've really painted the background, the historical background to Denmark's colonial attitude, genocidal attitude towards the people of Greenland. Now, so just explain to the listeners, why are you so happy that Trump is now you're reaching out um, covetously towards Greenland and kind of demanding that it should be American territory. I mean, some people might find that a bit odd. You're swapping one colonizer, uh, or Denmark, for an American imperialist. What do you see as the benefit of endorsing Trump's Greenland grab?
all right. One line more about history because it's important to your question. In 1953, Greenland became a Danish province. In 1979, it had home rule. In 2009, became a self-governing entity, except for foreign policy, except for so-called defense.
Hmm.
Now, another, lackey social democrat gave the United States the right to have atomic weapons in Greenland. He gave them that right in 1957 without telling the people of Denmark, and they didn't learn about it until 1991. When the United States was building Thule Base in 1951 to 53, they threw away forcibly what was called the Thule tribe of Greenlanders. So what's important today is that Denmark thinks that it should be able to defend, Greenland against, of course, Russians and Chinese. Now, everybody that knows anything knows that the Arctic is filled with resources, and Greenland itself has all kinds of known minerals and some that are very rare, and that there's a lot of money there to be made if it's
Mhm.
taken up. Now,
Mhm.
the United States has all kinds of means and power and money to take up these minerals, probably more so than does Denmark. So, of course, Trump, is an idiot, but he's also, an intelligent, capitalist.
Yeah.
He knows how to market.
So,
His
Ron,
marketing
let me
gave
just
him the power to become president again. So
okay.
they want the United his he wants to take Greenland for economic and
Yes.
and geopolitical, means. So
Okay.
maybe the passive Danes will wake up to say, "Hey, wait a minute. Maybe we ought to be on our own. Maybe we wouldn't shouldn't be lackeys and vassals of the United States." And maybe more Europeans will think that. This Ukraine war is also very important in the same context because many people, including this social democrat prostitute uh, prime minister, want to continue the war. They want to continue to feed fascist Ukraine to kill their own people and Russian people. And maybe Trump might just stop it. Now, I'm not saying you should vote for Trump, but if this and his money, as far as I can research, did not come from war. The Democrats' money comes from war. The Pentagon and the CIA and Wall Street, generally in Wall Street, they didn't want Trump as president again. They
Mm.
wanted Bin or this, and then this so-called black Indian, woman who, of course, Trump supports genocide and against the Palestinians, but all the politicians in Denmark, in Denmark also, and in the United States want genocide against the Palestinians. I'm not saying that Trump is going to solve many of our problems, but if he could stop the war, that's going to make the not just Danes, but Germans and others. Germans are so stupid they let them bomb and sabotage this Nord Stream. And Germany, and it was done, read Cy Hirsch, it was done by Norway and the United States, and Sweden and Denmark knew about it because it's in their economic territory where
Mm.
they did the sabotage. The
So you
greatest pollution to the water and air in history, and billions and billions and billions of gas lost.
so Ron, sorry to cut in on you. I'm just mindful we've got about 2.5 minutes left. You're happy, or you're kind of like amused by Trump's move on Greenland because in your view it fatally undermines NATO and it exposes NATO lackeys, and in that way could be fatally damaging, to NATO if Trump
Yeah,
grabs Denmark,
right.
Greenland from Denmark, it shakes the any sort of faith in American leadership.
Definitely. Another important item is that there's a new king. There was a queen for ages here, and now her son is the king. This, kings and queens. How stupid can you be, to have kings and queens today or ever? Anyway, the king had an appointment with the leadership of Greenland when Trump's son let them know he was coming. Do you know what? They canceled the goddamn meeting with this new fucking king of Denmark, who's also the king of Greenland, and they haven't reset the date. Now, this is extremely significant. They accepted that Trump's son comes. They wanted to know what the hell's going on. He was only there 5 hours. And I
Mm,
just saw the news last night where they're saying the king probably won't make a new date because it's very delicate, because the Greenlanders are coming to a vote, an election in April. 5 of the 6 parliamentary parties in Greenland are opposed to continuing to be a colony of a half colony of Denmark.
yeah.
They want independence. Now,
Okay.
was that going to influence them to go towards the United States? I don't know, and that's not what I want. But I want the Greenland people to be their own.
So, Ron, it's not so much that you want America to take ownership of Greenland. It's more the kind of corrosive effect it's having on NATO. That's your
Yes,
interest.
yes.
Yeah.
I
But
mean, NATO is splitting up.
your bottom line is go ahead, Trump, grab Greenland.
Yeah, yeah. I hope he takes it. I mean, if if it's not by force, I don't want the Greenlanders to, but he probably won't do it by force anyway. But if the majority of the Greenlanders think that they don't have enough to be totally independent and they go over to the Yankees, well, why not? I mean, there's not going to be any fucking difference. The Danes are